He didn't want to kill her. That would have been mercy. He wanted her to live and suffer every single day for the rest of her life. Sulfuric acid thrown directly into her face. Her skin didn't just burn, it melted, down to the bone. Her eye dissolved. 400 surgeries later. Doctors are still trying to put her back together. The man who ordered this attack, her boyfriend, the man she loved, the man she trusted with her life. But here's what nobody talks about. What he did to her 2 days before the acid. That's the part that broke the jury. That's the part that made grown detectives walk out of the interrogation room. Her name is Katie Piper, 24 years old, a model, a television presenter, the kind of girl who lit up every room she walked into. She had this smile. The kind that made you believe everything was going to be okay. She believed in people, she believed in love, she believed in second chances. She was living in London, chasing her dreams, building a career most people only fantasize about, magazine covers, TV spots, brand deals. Her future was so bright it was almost blinding. And then she met him, Daniel Lynch. Handsome, charming, intense, in all the ways that felt romantic at first. Imagine trusting someone completely. Imagine letting someone into your life, your home, your heart. Imagine thinking you'd found your person. That's what Katie thought. That's what he made her believe. But behind those eyes, something else was living. Something dark. Something that couldn't love, only possess. And when she finally saw it, when she finally tried to walk away, he made a decision. A decision so brutal, so calculated, that it would take investigators months to uncover just how deep his obsession really went. But there was someone else, someone watching from the shadows, someone Daniel had been communicating with in secret, text messages, phone calls, plans being made while Katie slept in the next room, plans involving fire, plans involving pain, plans involving a substance that would change her life forever. Forensic psychologists who studied this case said something chilling. They said Daniel Lynch exhibited a level of sadistic control rarely seen outside of serial killers. He didn't just want revenge, he wanted to erase her, not from the world, but from herself. He wanted to destroy the very thing he claimed to love most, her face. It all started with a single text message, Tuesday afternoon, March 29th, 2008. Katie was at a cafe with friends, laughing, living her life. Her phone buzzed. It was him. 5 words that would set everything in motion. 5 words she should have ignored. I need to see you. They met on a night out in London. One of those chance encounters that feels like fate. Katie was with friends at a bar. Daniel walked in. Their eyes met across the room. He approached her, confident, smooth. He told her she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. And she felt something, that flutter, that spark, that dangerous feeling of falling before you even know who's catching you. Their first date was at a restaurant in Covent Garden. He showed up with flowers. He asked her questions about her dreams, her family, her life. He listened, really listened. Or at least, that's what it felt like. He texted her good night. He texted her good morning. He made her feel like she was the center of his universe. And for a girl who'd been hurt before, that attention felt like love. Within 2 weeks, they were inseparable. He wanted to see her every day. He said he'd never felt this way about anyone. He talked about the future, their future. He said things like, "You're mine," and "I'll never let you go." And at the time, she thought it was romantic. She thought it meant he loved her. She didn't know those words were a warning. But her friends noticed something. The way he looked at her when she talked to other people, the way his jaw clenched when another man said hello, the way he always needed to know where she was. One of her friends pulled her aside and said, "There's something off about him." Katie laughed it off. "He just really loves me," she said. If only she'd listened. It started small, tiny cracks in the perfect facade. He wanted her to text him constantly. If she didn't reply within minutes, he'd call. If she didn't answer, he'd show up. "I was just worried about you," he'd say. And because Katie had a kind heart, she believed him. She thought his obsession was devotion. She thought his control was care. Then came the jealousy. A waiter smiled at her at dinner. Daniel went silent for the rest of the night. A colleague from work sent her a friendly message. Daniel demanded to see her phone. She showed him. It was innocent, but he didn't believe her. He accused her of lying, of cheating, of wanting to leave him. And then he cried. He apologized. He said he was just scared of losing her. And she forgave him. Again. Her friends started to disappear from her life, not because they wanted to, but because Daniel made it difficult. He'd pick fights before she went out with them. He'd guilt her into staying home. "Don't you want to spend time with me?" he'd ask. And slowly, quietly, she became isolated. Her world shrank until it was just him. And that's exactly what he wanted. And then one night she tried to leave a party early because she was tired. Daniel grabbed her arm, hard enough to bruise, hard enough to hurt. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw it. The rage behind his eyes, the thing he'd been hiding all along. That was the moment she knew. She had to get out. Breaking up with Daniel Lynch was the bravest thing Katie Piper ever did, and the most dangerous. She told him it was over. She told him she needed space. She told him she couldn't do this anymore. And his reaction? It was calm. Too calm. He looked at her with this blank expression and said, "You'll regret this. Not, I'll change. Not, please don't go. Just, you'll regret this." The first few days after the breakup, her phone exploded. Texts, calls, voicemails, hundreds of them. Some were begging, some were angry, some were threats wrapped in declarations of love. "You're making a mistake. No one will ever love you like I do. If I can't have you, no one will." Katie blocked his number. He got new numbers. She blocked those too. He started emailing. She blocked him everywhere, and that's when the stalking began. He showed up at her apartment, at her gym, at her favorite coffee shop. He was always there, always watching. She'd leave work, and he'd be across the street. She'd go out with friends, and he'd be at the same bar. She changed her routine. She took different routes. She stopped going to the places she loved, but he always found her. It was like he had a GPS on her soul. She told her friends, she told her family, she even considered going to the police, but she thought, what will they do? He hasn't hurt me, he's just everywhere. She didn't know that while she was trying to move on, Daniel Lynch was planning something that would make her wish she'd called the police, something that would change her life forever. Let me tell you what obsession looks like. Daniel created fake social media accounts to follow Katie. He messaged her friends pretending to be someone else, trying to get information about her. He sat outside her apartment for hours, sometimes all night. Neighbors saw him. They thought he was just a boyfriend waiting for his girlfriend. They had no idea they were watching a predator hunting his prey. Katie started having panic attacks. She couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump. Every car that drove by made her look out the window. She felt like she was being hunted, because she was. Her friends begged her to get a restraining order, but Katie worried it would make things worse, that it would provoke him. So she tried to handle it quietly. She tried to just survive it. But Daniel wasn't going to let her survive in peace. The messages got darker. "I see you. You look beautiful today in that blue dress. You can't hide from me." And then, "If I can't have you, I'll make sure no one else wants you." That message, that one message, should have sent her running to the police again. But Katie thought he was just trying to scare her. She thought if she ignored him long enough, he'd move on. She was wrong. What Katie didn't know was that Daniel was spiraling. His friends later told police that he'd become unrecognizable. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. All he talked about was Katie, how she'd betrayed him, how she needed to pay. He was drinking heavily, using drugs, and in his mind, he was the victim. She was the villain, and villains needed to be punished. One night, Katie came home to find her apartment door unlocked. She knew she'd locked it. She walked in slowly, heart pounding. Nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But something was different. And then she saw it. On her pillow, a single red rose and a note. "I'll always find my way back to you." She called the police that night. They took a report. They said they'd patrol the area, but there was nothing they could legally do. Not yet. Daniel's Google search history would later be pulled by investigators. And what they found, it made their blood run cold. How to get revenge on ex-girlfriend. Acid attack survival rate. How to disfigure someone permanently. Where to buy sulfuric acid. How to hire someone for a job. He wasn't just angry, he was researching, planning, preparing. And then he found Stefan Silvestre, a low-level criminal, someone desperate for money, someone with no connection to Katie, someone perfect for what Daniel had in mind. They met in a pub. Daniel offered him £200, £200 to throw acid in a woman's face, and Stefan, he said yes. Just like that, for less than the cost of a weekend getaway. He agreed to destroy someone's life. But here's the thing. Daniel didn't want Katie dead. He made that very clear to Stefan. "I want her to live," he said. "I want her to wake up every morning and look in the mirror and remember me." That level of cruelty, that level of sadistic calculation, it's rare. Even in the worst domestic violence cases, he wanted her to survive, because death would be too kind. Katie had no idea any of this was happening. She was trying to rebuild her life. She'd started seeing a therapist to deal with the anxiety. She was reconnecting with friends. She was even considering moving to a new city to start fresh. She thought the worst was behind her. She thought he was finally leaving her alone. The messages had stopped. The stalking seemed to have ended. She felt like she could breathe again. But the silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. Daniel had stopped contacting her because he didn't need to anymore. He knew where she lived. He knew her routine. He knew exactly when and where to strike. All he needed now was to get her alone, just one more time. And he knew exactly how to do it. He knew her weakness, her kindness, her inability to completely shut the door on someone she once loved. March 29th, 2008. That text message. "I need to see you." And against every instinct screaming at her to say no, Katie replied, "Why?" He wrote back, "I just want closure. I want to apologize properly, face to face, just one conversation. Then I'll leave you alone forever." She stared at that message for a long time, and then she agreed to meet him. It was the decision that would nearly kill her. They met at a hotel in North London. Neutral ground, public, safe, or so she thought. Daniel was different that night. Calm, almost normal. He apologized for everything. He said he'd been seeing a therapist. He said he understood why she left. He said he just wanted to move forward as friends. And Katie, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe people could change. So when he asked if they could talk upstairs in his room, where it was quieter, she hesitated. But he promised. "Just talking, I swear." What happened in that hotel room over the next 48 hours is something Katie barely spoke about for years. It was too painful, too humiliating, too traumatic. But eventually she told the truth, because she realized staying silent only protected him in turn, and he didn't deserve protection. The door locked behind her, and his face changed. The mask dropped. And she knew. She'd made a terrible mistake. Daniel didn't want closure. He wanted control. One last time. He wanted to prove that she was still his, that she would always be his, and for the next 2 days, he made sure she understood that. He raped her, repeatedly, violently. He told her that this was her punishment for leaving him. He told her that no one would believe her if she reported it. He told her that if she tried to leave, it would be worse. Katie begged him to stop. She cried. She apologized for things she didn't do. She said whatever she thought would make him let her go. And finally, after 2 days, he did. He released her. He looked her in the eyes and said, "Remember this. Remember that you belong to me. If you ever tell anyone about this, you'll regret it." And then he let her walk out the door. Katie was in shock. She went home. She showered for hours. She couldn't stop shaking. She wanted to go to the police, but she was terrified. Terrified he'd come after her. Terrified no one would believe her. Terrified it would ruin her career. So she kept it to herself. She told no one, not her friends, not her family. She just tried to pretend it never happened. She tried to move on. She thought if she stayed quiet, he would leave her alone now. She thought it was over. But what Katie didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Daniel never intended for that to be the end. The rape wasn't revenge. It was a prelude. The real punishment was already in motion. Stefan Silvestre had already been paid. The acid had already been purchased. The plan was already set, and in less than 72 hours, Katie Piper's life would be destroyed in the most horrific way imaginable. March 31st, 2008. Katie woke up exhausted. She hadn't slept in days. Her body ached. Her mind was fractured, but she forced herself to get up, to get dressed, to pretend she was okay. She met a friend at an internet cafe in Golders Green, just trying to feel normal, just trying to exist. She ordered a coffee. She sat down at a computer. She was checking her emails. She had no idea that across the street, someone was watching her. Stefan Silvestre had been following her all morning, waiting for the right moment. He had a cup in his hand, a takeaway coffee cup, but it wasn't coffee inside, it was sulfuric acid, concentrated, industrial strength, the kind used to dissolve metal, and he was about to throw it in her face. He'd been paid £200 to do this. £200. That's what Katie's face was worth to him. Katie left the cafe. She stepped outside into the sunlight. She was texting her mum, telling her she'd call later, and then she heard footsteps behind her, fast, getting closer. She turned around. And that's when she saw him, a stranger, running toward her. She didn't have time to scream, didn't have time to run. He pulled his arm back and threw the contents of that cup directly into her face. The pain was instant and indescribable. Katie said later, it felt like her face was on fire from the inside out. The acid burned through her skin in seconds, through tissue, through muscle, down to the bone. Her left eye started dissolving, her throat started closing. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think. She just screamed, and screamed, and screamed. People on the street heard her. They came running. They saw her face melting, literally melting off her skull. Someone called 999. Someone threw water on her. But water doesn't stop sulfuric acid. It just spreads it. Her clothes were burning into her skin. Her hair was singed. Her chest, her arms, her hands. Everywhere the acid touched, it destroyed. One witness later said, "I've never heard a human being make sounds like that. It didn't sound real." The ambulance arrived within minutes. Paramedics took one look at her and radioed ahead to the hospital. Critical burns, face and upper body. Patient is conscious and in severe distress. They didn't say what they were really thinking. That they'd never seen injuries this bad on someone still alive. That they weren't sure she'd survive the ride to the hospital. That even if she did, she'd never be the same. Katie arrived at the hospital and was rushed into emergency. Nurses cut away her clothing. Doctors assessed the damage, and even they, trained professionals who'd seen car crashes, explosions, industrial accidents, even they had to step away for a moment. One nurse broke down crying. Another requested to be reassigned. The attending physician later admitted, "In 20 years of emergency medicine, I'd never seen chemical burns that severe. Her face was gone." They flushed her wounds. They administered pain medication. They wrapped her in bandages. But there was only so much they could do in that moment. The acid had already done its work. Her left eye was destroyed beyond repair. The cornea was burned through. She would be blind in that eye for the rest of her life. Her face was burned down to the bone in several places. Her throat was damaged. Her esophagus was scarred. She couldn't swallow, could barely breathe. And then came the moment every burn victim dreads. Katie regained full consciousness, and she asked for a mirror. The nurses exchanged looks. "Not yet," they said. "You need to rest first." But Katie knew. She could feel it. She could feel that everything had changed. She whispered one question. "Am I going to die?" And the doctor paused, too long, before saying, "We're doing everything we can." Police arrived at the hospital within the hour. They needed to know what happened, who did this, why. But Katie couldn't speak. Her throat was too damaged, so she wrote on a notepad with her bandaged hands. One word. "Daniel." The officers looked at each other. "Daniel who?" She wrote again. "Lynch, my ex." And just like that, the investigation had a starting point. Detectives pulled Daniel Lynch's records. They found the harassment reports Katie had filed, the stalking complaints, the text messages, and they found something else. Phone records showing dozens of calls between Daniel and an unknown number in the days before the attack. They traced that number. It belonged to Stefan Silvestre, a 26-year-old man with a criminal record. No connection to Katie, but multiple calls to Daniel. They brought Stefan in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. "I don't know what you're talking about." But when they showed him CCTV footage from the street, when they showed him witnesses identifying him, when they told him Katie had survived and could identify him, he broke. "I didn't want to do it," he said. "But he paid me." He said she deserved it. He said she ruined his life. Stefan told them everything. How Daniel approached him in a pub. How he offered him £200. How he described exactly what he wanted done. "Make sure it's her face," Daniel had said. "I want her to look in the mirror every day and think of me." Stefan led police to the place where he'd purchased the acid. He showed them the text messages coordinating the attack. He gave them everything. Because he realized he'd been used. He'd been a weapon in someone else's revenge. Police arrested Daniel Lynch at his apartment. He was calm. Too calm. Like he'd been expecting them. They read him his rights. Charged him with grievous bodily harm with intent, conspiracy to commit assault, and when they searched his apartment, they found his computer. And what was on that computer made detectives physically ill. Search history. Acid attack disfigurement. How long does it take to recover from acid burns? Acid attack before and after photos. He'd been researching this for months. During the interrogation, Daniel showed no remorse. Zero. Detectives tried to get him to explain why. Why would you do this to someone you claim to love? And his answer is something that still haunts those detectives. He said, "She embarrassed me. She made me look like a fool. She needed to learn that actions have consequences. If I couldn't have her beauty, no one should." He genuinely believed he was justified. Forensic psychologists were brought in to evaluate Daniel Lynch. Their diagnosis? Narcissistic personality disorder with sadistic features. They explained that in his mind, Katie wasn't a person. She was an object. His object. And when that object tried to leave, he needed to destroy it. Not kill it. Destroy it. Because death would mean she escaped. But disfigurement. Disfigurement meant she'd carry him with her forever. She'd see his revenge every time she looked in a mirror. The rape came out during the investigation. Katie finally told police what Daniel had done to her in that hotel room 2 days before the acid attack. And suddenly everything made sense. He'd wanted to break her twice, once privately, once publicly. He wanted to take her dignity and her beauty. He wanted to erase everything she was, and he nearly succeeded. Additional charges were filed: rape, false imprisonment, kidnapping. The trial began in 2009. Daniel Lynch pleaded not guilty. He actually tried to claim he had nothing to do with it, that Stefan acted alone, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. Text messages, phone records, financial transactions, witness testimony, and Katie's testimony. She walked into that courtroom with her scars visible. She looked Daniel in the eyes, and she told the jury everything he'd done to her. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Daniel Lynch was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years for grievous bodily harm with intent. Stefan Sylvester received a life sentence with a minimum of 6 years. As Daniel was led away, he looked back at Katie one last time, and he smiled. He actually smiled, like even in defeat, he'd still won. Because she'd never looked the same again. Let me tell you what recovery from an acid attack actually looks like, because it's not just physical, it's not just scars, it's a complete dismantling of everything you thought your life would be. Katie spent the first month in a medically induced coma. Her body was in shock. The infection risk was too high. Doctors needed time to assess the full damage. When she finally woke up, she still hadn't seen her face. The first surgery happened within 48 hours of the attack. Emergency debridement. That's where they remove dead tissue before it becomes necrotic. They cut away parts of her face, parts that couldn't be saved. Katie was under anesthesia, but her body knew. Your body always knows when it's being taken apart. The surgery lasted 8 hours. It was the first of 400. 400 surgeries. Let that number sink in. Skin grafts taken from her back, her legs, her scalp. Reconstructive procedures trying to rebuild what the acid destroyed. Eye surgeries attempting to save whatever vision remained. Procedures to repair her throat so she could swallow, so she could eat, so she could speak without pain. Some surgeries lasted 10, 12, 14 hours. Some required weeks of recovery before the next one could even be scheduled. Her medical team included plastic surgeons, ophthalmologists, trauma specialists, pain management doctors, and psychiatrists. They called her case one of the most complex in UK medical history. Not just because of the severity, but because of the extent. The acid had damaged so much surface area. Her face, her neck, her chest, her hands, every part of her that had tried to shield herself from the attack. And the pain. The constant, unrelenting pain. Burn victims describe it as fire that never goes out. Your nerve endings are exposed. Everything hurts. Air hurts. Fabric hurts. Movement hurts. Katie was on morphine for months, and even that barely touched it. She said there were nights she begged doctors to just let her die because the pain was so bad, death seemed like relief. The infections were another battle. Her immune system was compromised. Open wounds are breeding grounds for bacteria. She developed sepsis twice, nearly died both times, spent weeks in isolation while antibiotics tried to fight infections that were becoming resistant. Doctors told her family to prepare for the worst, multiple times. But Katie, somehow, kept fighting. And then there were the surgeries that couldn't fix anything, the experimental procedures, the ones where doctors tried something new because they'd run out of standard options. Stem cell treatments, laser therapies, tissue expansion. Some worked, some didn't. But Katie kept trying, because what choice did she have? Give up? Let Daniel win? No. She refused to let him have that victory. Her medical bills would have bankrupted most families. But the NHS covered her care. The hospital even provided psychological support for Katie's family. Because watching someone you love go through this, it destroys you too. Katie's mother said she couldn't sleep for 2 years. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her daughter's face melting. She saw the before. She saw the after. She saw the life that was stolen. And after 400 surgeries, after years of procedures and pain and recovery, Katie looked in a mirror, really looked. And the person staring back was a stranger. Her face was scarred, discolored, asymmetrical. Her left eye was gone, replaced with a prosthetic. This was her new reality. This was who she was now. And she had to decide, could she live with that? The physical scars were visible. The psychological ones were buried deeper. PTSD, severe depression, suicidal ideation. Katie was diagnosed with all of it. She had nightmares every night. The same nightmare. She's back on that street. She sees Stefan running toward her. She tries to move, but her body won't respond, and then the pain, even in sleep, her brain wouldn't let her forget. She was afraid to leave the house, and afraid of people staring. And they did stare, everywhere she went. Children asked their parents, "So what's wrong with that lady's face?" Adults tried not to look, and that somehow felt worse. She wore sunglasses, scarves, hats, anything to hide. But you can't hide burns that severe. People always see. And their reactions. Every shocked expression, every look of pity. It was another wound. Katie attempted suicide. Twice. Once with pills. Once by trying to reopen her wounds. Both times she was found in time. Both times she was hospitalized. And both times she woke up angry. Angry that she'd failed. Angry that she was still here. Angry that Daniel had taken everything from her and she couldn't even take herself out of the equation. Her therapist later said, those were the darkest days. When Katie truly didn't want to survive. There were months where she wouldn't speak, couldn't speak. Not because of physical damage, but because what was there to say? What words exist for this kind of loss? She'd lost her career, her face, her identity, her sense of safety in the world. She'd lost the ability to walk down a street without fear, the ability to trust another person, the ability to look in a mirror and recognize herself. Her therapist introduced her to other burn survivors, people who understood, people who'd lived through similar trauma. And something shifted. Katie met a woman who'd survived a house fire. She met a man who'd been burned in an industrial accident. She met a child who'd been scarred by boiling water. And all of them had found ways to keep living, not just surviving, living. That's when Katie made a decision, a conscious, deliberate decision. She could let this destroy her. She could let Daniel win. She could spend the rest of her life hiding and hating herself and wishing she'd died, or she could fight back. Not with violence, not with revenge, but by refusing to disappear, by refusing to be ashamed, by turning her pain into something that might help someone else. And that's exactly what she did. In 2009, Katie Piper did something extraordinary. She allowed a documentary crew to film her recovery. She let cameras into her hospital room, into her therapy sessions, into her darkest moments. And she told her story, not the sanitized version, the real version, the brutal, honest, devastating truth of what it's like to survive something like this. That documentary aired on Channel 4, and it changed everything. Millions of people watched Katie's documentary, and for the first time, they saw what acid attack survivors actually go through. Not just the attack itself, but the aftermath, the endless surgeries, the psychological torture, the way society treats you when your face doesn't look the way it's supposed to. And people responded, not with pity, with admiration, with respect. Katie received thousands of letters from people saying, "You're the bravest person I've ever seen." But Katie didn't stop there. In 2010, she founded the Katie Piper Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting burns survivors, providing them with medical resources, psychological support, and community. Because Katie realized something. She wasn't alone. There were thousands of people living with burns and scars. and most of them were suffering in silence. She wanted to give them a voice. She wanted to give them hope. She wrote books, Beautiful and Things Get Better, bestsellers. She became a motivational speaker. She stood on stages in front of thousands of people and shared her story. The girl who once couldn't leave her house was now inspiring audiences around the world. She started hosting her own TV show, Katie Piper's Face to Face. She interviewed other people with visible differences. She normalized what society had taught us to fear. Katie got married. She had children. 2 beautiful daughters. Things Daniel Lynch told her would never happen. He said no one would ever love her again. He said she'd never have a normal life. He said she'd spend every day regretting leaving him. He was wrong about all of it. Katie built a life. Not the life she'd planned, but a life filled with purpose and meaning and love. She's campaigned for longer sentences for acid attackers. She's worked with lawmakers to restrict the sale of corrosive substances. She's fought to change the system that failed to protect her, and she's won. Laws have changed because of Katie Piper. Sentences have increased. Restrictions have been implemented. She took her trauma and turned it into tangible change that will protect future victims. Today, Katie Piper is 41 years old. She's a mother, an author, a TV presenter, an activist, and a survivor. She still has scars. She always will. She still has surgeries. The medical battle never truly ends. But she's alive. She's thriving. She's proof that even the most brutal violence doesn't have to define you. That you can be broken and still rebuild yourself into something beautiful. Remember those doctors who needed therapy after treating her? One of them reached out to Katie years later. He told her that treating her case had nearly broken him, that he'd had nightmares, that he'd questioned whether he could continue in emergency medicine. But then he watched her documentary. He saw what she'd become. And he said, "You taught me what human resilience really looks like. You reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place." Daniel Lynch is still in prison. He'll be eligible for parole soon. Katie has said if he's released, she'll fight it. Not because she's afraid of him anymore, but because she knows there are other women out there, other victims, and she wants to protect them. She wants the system to understand that men like Daniel Lynch don't change. They don't rehabilitate. They don't deserve second chances when they deliberately destroyed someone's first chance. So what do we take from Katie Piper's story? What's the lesson in all this horror? It's this. Abuse doesn't always announce itself with bruises. Sometimes it starts with too much attention, too much love, too much need. The warning signs were there. The possessiveness, the jealousy, the isolation, the control. And Katie saw them. She just didn't realize how dangerous they were until it was too late. If you recognize these patterns in your own relationship, please leave. I know it's not that simple. I know it's terrifying. I know you might think he'll change, or it's not that bad, or you can handle it, but Katie thought those things too. And she nearly died because of it. There are resources. There are people who will help. You don't have to do this alone. And your life, your beautiful, precious life, is worth saving. For burn survivors watching this, for anyone living with scars, visible or invisible, from violence, Katie wants you to know this. You are not your trauma. You are not what was done to you. You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are a survivor. And survival isn't about going back to who you were before. It's about discovering who you can become after. It's about refusing to let the person who hurt you have the final word on your story. Katie Piper was told she'd never work again, never be loved again, never have a normal life again. She was told her life was over at 24 years old. But she's proved every single one of those predictions wrong, not because she's superhuman, not because she's special, but because she made a choice every single day to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep living, even when living felt impossible. 400 surgeries, doctors in therapy, a face melted by acid. And somehow, Katie Piper is still standing, still smiling, still helping others, still refusing to be defined by the cruelty of one man's obsession. If that's not the definition of strength, I don't know what is. This is Katie Piper's story, a story of survival so brutal that even medical professionals couldn't process it. But it's also a story of hope, of resilience, of the unbreakable human spirit. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to let the darkness win. Katie is still writing her story, and the chapters ahead? They belong to her, not to Daniel Lynch, not to the acid, not to the scars, to her. The Katie Piper Foundation continues to support burn survivors across the UK and beyond. If you want to help, if you want to be part of something that actually makes a difference, the link is in the description. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to Katie's story. And if you're going through something dark right now, if you're in a situation that scares you, if you're with someone who makes you feel small or afraid or trapped, please reach out. Please get help. Because your story doesn't have to end in tragedy. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. And most of all, you deserve to survive.